Welcome to a new episode of New Normal Podcast. If this is your first time here, thank you. My name is Andrew Mayer, and this podcast is about innovation and innovating in these digital times. Today, I've got Howard Tiersky. He is CEO and founder of From, the digital transformation company. He has a Wall Street Journal bestselling book. When I showed his book titled Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance to a son of mine just a few weeks back, my son's response was, "Yep, that's you, Dad." I feel I've met another traveler on this journey to digital nirvana. Those are my words, not his. I asked Howard about, is adding a chatbot, is that to be considered digital transformation? You might like his response to that. You'll hear me introduce him in just a moment. I did ask him what innovation means to him, as I asked all of my guests here, and you might be surprised by his answer.
I've sometimes found myself in meetings where people are arguing about what does innovation mean? And in the end, it kind of doesn't matter all that much. We need to figure out what we need to do to be successful.
But he did have other takes on that as well. This was really a great find for me, that it was his team at the company From who found me, my little New Normal podcast. They came onto their radar somehow. Of course, I had to grab his book and get to reading it. Really good stuff. Not a lot of new surprises for me here, but they were put in a format here and with additional resources that you can download off the internet. Super idea and very, very helpful to get started and hit the ground running here. I didn't have to buy the book, but with a title like Winning Digital Customers, well, how could I skip that one? Nevertheless, it was a fun interview. Updates. Only update right now to talk about is I'm going to start swapping out and switching up a little bit on the formats of these podcasts here. I've been focusing solely on finding interview partners, and I've got a lot of those to do, but there's other things I would like to talk about and introduce, things that I'm learning, things that I'd like to go a little bit deeper on. So I'm going to have interviews in the podcast, but I'll have other types of episodes as well here. Not a new podcast. Everything's under the same subscription. And by the way, I hope you're subscribed. That would be great. And if you are perhaps an Apple user, if you go over and leave a review on Apple for the podcast, those seem to be really important. It's really nice to see that the people from Howard's company From were able to find me. So that seems to work a lot. In the show notes, as always, for these podcasts here, there are links to Howard's company, also to Howard's podcast. Really quite interesting and very entertaining. Finally, if you leave me a comment anywhere you might find me on the internet, and you tell me how Howard compares a chatbot to garlic, I will get you a copy of his book.
Ho, ho, ho! This offer is limited to the first 5 people who leave a correct comment. Also, you will be asked for your mailing address via private message or email. In addition, the first 5 Apple Podcast reviews will also receive a copy of Howard's book Winning Digital Customers. Now back to Andrew and the New Normal Podcast.
Now let's get over to the interview. So, quick introduction. Howard is CEO and founder of From. From is the digital transformation agency. Welcome to New Normal Podcast.
Oh, Andrew, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Your company From has been into the digital transformation business since 2007, is what I found on your LinkedIn profile. So my first complaint is, why did you wait to write this book now and not 10 years ago?
Well, it's time consuming to write a book, and I've been writing articles for many, many, many years. So some people have followed my work that way. And after many years of writing articles and doing videos and other things, several people said to me, you should put all this stuff together into a book. So it turned out to be a lot more work than just putting a bunch of articles together. I actually wound up rewriting nearly everything from scratch. But I think it was really after writing hundreds of articles on different aspects of digital transformation, from building a business case to using design thinking to running ideation workshops to measuring and iterating your products after they launch to organizational change. And there's so many parts of digital transformation, and I'd written articles on some of those topics. It then seemed less onerous to write a book. And so that's what led me down that path eventually.
And now you've got a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and I'm an owner of a copy of it. And as I told you in the pre-roll, those who might listen to the podcast, if you reference this podcast and maybe some key I mentioned in the pre-roll later on, I'm going to give a book away to one of those listeners in the podcast here. So my second question, which I think is for the listeners here, really relevant. Why should or must, as you might say, a business digitally transform?
The world is undergoing a digital transformation. And even more importantly, your customers are undergoing a digital transformation. The behavior of your customers today is dramatically different from what it was 10 years ago, frankly, even 2 years ago. And the main difference, there may be other differences, but the main difference is that their lives become even more digitally centric. They're sleeping with their phone beside their bed, and more facets of their life are funneled through some kind of an app or some kind of an online platform. And so as a business, when your customer undergoes that kind of change, you've really just got two choices. You can change to continue to be relevant to your customer, or you can become irrelevant and probably go out of business. These are really the options. And if we look, there's so many companies that you could look at a company like Sears. There was a time when Sears was the number one retailer in the United States. In 1969, Sears was the number one retailer. Their revenue was approximately equivalent to 1% of the US gross domestic product. That is about what Amazon is today. Of course, the GDP is larger today than it was in 1969, but Amazon's revenue, just for retail, I'm not talking about the other aspects of Amazon, is about 1% of the US GDP. So consider that there was a time when another company had that level of retail dominance. And where are they now? Sears has gone from having over 3,500 stores to, I believe, 30, something like that, 15 Sears and 15 Kmart, something like that. So for all intents and purposes, Sears is gone. They're irrelevant. They're off the map. And so, but that's what happens when, they were obviously highly relevant to the customer at one point in time, but they didn't change or change fast enough. The customer changed, and this is where they are. That's why I titled my book, Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance, because today's customers, I call them digital customers, not because everything they want in their life is digital. They still want to have a nice meal. They don't want to eat a digital meal, but they're living a lifestyle with digital at the center, which means that they expect to be able to make a reservation digitally, maybe see a menu digitally, get the receipt digitally. So it's not all about being digital, but about appealing to these digital customers, the people with their lives so driven by digital. And so I think that's why digital transformation is so important. It's transform or die, not to be overly dramatic.
Transform or die. That sounds like a t-shirt I should put out to sell. And I remember growing up and being so excited every time the new Sears catalog came out, and I flipped through all, 800 pages of it, looking at every lawnmower and tractor they sold out there. I was going to ask you about the difference between loyalty to a company versus love for them, but I decided not to because out of interest that people should go out and buy your book. So selfish plug here. I've enjoyed it. That was a surprise for me. It's very early on in the book. And I thought it was quite relevant to just sit back and kind of look in the mirror and take my own interest in certain companies. And what do I think of them? How do I support them? Is it just the loyalty card in my wallet, or is it some other reason that I keep going, spending a lot of money at a certain cell phone company? My third question for you is, I work with a lot of integrators, people, technologists, and clients. Is deploying a chatbot or adding Apple Pay or enabling a WhatsApp channel, is that digital transformation?
Well, that's a little bit like asking me if garlic is a meal. It can be part of a meal, but it's certainly not a meal in and of itself. The goal of digital transformation is to provide a fantastic experience for digitally centered customers. That's how I would just loosely describe it. So is deploying a chatbot part of that? Maybe, could be. Virtual reality? Maybe. Artificial intelligence? Maybe. Cloud computing? Maybe. Drones? Maybe, right? There's lots of possible ingredients that can go into your digital transformation. I think that the biggest risk, though, is that people think that if they deploy to some kind of fancy new technology, that is getting them somewhere, because it might be. But if I'm trying to make a bowl of Fruit Loops for my daughter and I start to put some garlic in it, that's probably not getting me anywhere. What I talk about in the book is an approach to digital transformation that starts by understanding the customer. What are their points of pain, and how can we create a better experience for them? And That may involve a chatbot. It may not. It depends on the situation. It depends on the customer, et cetera. So I think you want to view all of these technologies that as possible ingredients in the experience you're trying to create. But then you need to figure out what's the experience that's going to drive the behavior of your customer in a way that's consistent with the success of your business.
You do say, though, later in your book that the digital transformation is a process. It's a lot of energy, it's a lot of time. It means change, also means pain. And you also mentioned that there are low-hanging fruit along the way. So you don't have to wait for the whole process to happen. There are certain things, and it could be a chatbot, it could be a WhatsApp, it could be things like that where you've noticed a pain point somewhere in the process for that quick win, right?
Oh, there's no question. I think that one of the challenges of transformation is that the scale of transformation that most businesses need, most businesses are behind. And they were most large companies in particular. And that's the domain that I primarily work with, is large brands. And it's even harder with large brands, because if you think, if you're running a one location diner and you want to transform, think about the level of effort. And maybe it seems significant, but imagine you're Denny's and you're running thousands of locations. Of course, it's a bigger job, right? You've got more people, you've got more locations, you've got more complexity. So I think that, everybody's got to be thinking about how to drive that kind of transformation at the scale that they're operating.
So early in the recent 18-month pandemic that we're in globally here, I think it was in May of last year, Scott Galloway from the New York University School of Business, he said the coronavirus triggered a decade's worth of changes in many industries in a matter of months, and things will never be the same. Have you observed any of these noticeable increase in transformation, interest, processes in the last 18 months with your clients?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. And, the CEO of Microsoft made a similar comment. I don't know how to measure how many years of change, but there's no question. And again, going back to the way that I see the world, which starts at the customer, people were already on a curve of adopting more and more digital ways of doing things. Every day, somebody who never used Uber before or Lyft before tries a ride sharing service. Everyone who's never used Airbnb before, every day there's somebody who's never used eBay before who tries eBay again, or people who've used it start to use it more often, et cetera, right? So there was already a compounding growth of people's use of digital tools. A new person signs up for Netflix and starts watching. A new person gets an iPad, whatever. But all of a sudden, when you had a pandemic, we created a forcing function. Because instead of choosing to say, maybe I'll try Instacart to order my groceries instead of driving to the grocery store, you're like, well, driving to the grocery store and shopping could kill me. So maybe instead of waiting for me to feel comfortable and ready, it became almost, I was almost forced into this, or it became the only logical thing. So all of a sudden, many more people started adopting digital ways of engaging certain behaviors, such as shopping, such as entertainment. People who, said, oh, normally I like to go to the movies. Well, you couldn't go to them. So all of a sudden people got a Netflix subscription. So yes, there's no question that the digital, that COVID accelerated digital. And furthermore, not just to the consumer, but from the perspective of the workplace. Because of course, many people were already using cloud-based tools and video conferencing and all these types of things, but still hugely large percentage of people, a huge majority of people were still showing up every day to their office to work. So they may be using those tools, but they became 10 times more critical and they got used so much more when all of a sudden no one could go to the office and everyone had to work remotely. So both business tools and sort of the B2C components of our personal lives all got much accelerated because the non-digital options were removed. And I think that, one of the things that, studies of psychology show that if you want to get a new habit, if you want to ingrain a new behavior, force yourself to do it for, they say, 6 weeks, and you'll do it forever. If you want to start working out every day, for a while, it's going to feel like a burden. You're not used to it. You got to force yourself. But if you force yourself to work out 5 days a week, by the time you've done it for 6 weeks, now it's your habit. Now you're going into it automatically. Now you don't have to force yourself so much. So they say. Of course, I'm sure it's not exactly 6 weeks for everybody. And so what did we do? We forced people into new behaviors for a heck of a lot longer than 6 weeks. We did it for like 18 months. But assuming that we're now starting to finally get back to normal, we're seeing a lot of behaviors that became habits that were originally forced. but then became habits during COVID. And I think we can expect that while there'll be some going back to old habits, hey, it's great to finally be able to go to a restaurant or a movie if you haven't been able to do it for 18 months. We're going to see some bounce back. We're also going to see people keeping many of the habits they developed during COVID. I was at a client recently where most of the people were back in the office. It was a big financial services company, and the company had said, everyone back in the office now. They wanted everyone in the office. I was there for a meeting. And so I went to the office of my sort of main client, and there were about 6 or 7 different people who were supposed to be in the meeting. And when the time came, I said, oh, okay, have you guys got a conference room or something? They said, oh, no, we're just doing it on Zoom. And I'm like, I thought everyone was in the office. They're like, they are, but we're just going to do it on Zoom. So I sat in my client's office, the 2 of us, got on Zoom with 6 or 8 other people who were either on that same floor or the floor below. But nobody seemed to feel the need to bother moving their atoms to a conference room to be in the same place. And we just did it as we had been doing it for the last year of working on stuff together. So there you go.
I think going back to the old is going to be tough. I think we're going to see some going to a restaurant. I was in New York City last month and going out, and of course, all the restaurants are out on the streets now, which is an interesting thing in Manhattan there. But sitting down at a table and looking at somebody else and making eye contact and whatever was a real pleasure to do that.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I don't want to be in a big crowd right now at a restaurant, and that might be a long time before we feel comfortable doing that again. So many of my listeners are customer experience technology suppliers or clients looking into adding digital to their suite of options. They're not usually in a position to suggest a larger transformation project. We talked earlier already about low-hanging fruit or quick wins along the way. What other suggestions might you have for those who are looking to add digital to their offerings?
My first thought is I would challenge the assumption that you're not in a position to suggest a transformation project. Sometimes we're limited by our own assumptions about what we think we're permitted to do. One of the great things about being an outside consultant or agency is that, you don't exactly have a boss within the organization. You're not constrained by the organizational hierarchy. Now, of course, you might feel that way. You might feel, well, I have my client, and I don't want to annoy the person who's hiring me by going to someone 5 levels above. But there are ways of nuancing that. And if you've spent a fair amount of time working with that company and you have the mindset to think about the kind of transformation that company should or could be embarking upon, if you've read my book and applied some of these principles, and you have something that I don't have, which is you really understand that company, if you've worked with them for a while, then I would suggest that you come up with a vision for transformation and maybe socialize it first with the manager, the middle level person you're talking to, and say, listen, I'd love to approach whoever, your CEO, your CMO, with this, you don't have to be part of it. You can either introduce me to that. If you believe in this vision of transformation, you can say, hey, our agency has come up with this. They're not billing me for it. This is just something extra. And they'd love to share it with you. And I think it's interesting and I'd love you to see it. Or if you, my direct manager client, is worried you don't want any part of this, you don't want to get in trouble, then I don't even have to involve you. As long as, you're going to be upset, I can reach out to this senior level person and say, hey, listen, we've been working with some parts of your organization. I don't even have to mention your name. And we have some insights and we'd love to come in and share them with you. So that would be my first thought is don't hold yourself back. If you have a vision for transformation, I remember when I started my own company, because I run a consulting firm / agency of about 100 people. And I came from Capgemini and Ernst & Young, which were consulting companies of, I think at the time, we thought Ernst & Young was pretty big when we had 30,000 people. It was clearly a whole different order of magnitude. And I remember when I started my company, there were some people who said to me, well, you're never going to be able to go to General Electric. You're never going to be able to go to these big companies. You're such a small company. That's totally false. All my clients are big companies. I'm not a big company. They know I'm not a big company, but they hire small companies to do things all the time. Big projects too. So don't psych yourself out and think that you're not capable or don't have permission. Go for it. That's my first thought. But having said that, to answer your question, if you're sort of a communications company and you're being asked to help think about what to do to support digital, and you do want to stay kind of at the level that you're being asked to operate at, I still think you can apply the principles of my book. I think you want to say, okay, well, what is it I am being asked to do? So let's say I'm working for a company that makes razors and I'm working on the websites for one line of women's razors, just making something up. So, I don't feel that I'm in a position, I'm not really talking to the people who would transform the entire company that probably makes lots of different products,
Hmm.
but I'm working with the manager who's responsible for the website for the razor. Okay. And I don't know how many people go to websites to look and learn about razors. Probably most don't. But anyway, that's the work. That's my gig. That's what I've been hired to do. Well, I think you want to ask yourself, okay, well, if we're trying to create, a next generation digital vision for how we communicate the value proposition of our women's razor, I would start by understanding, well, what are the points of pain that women have associated with using this product, with buying the product, with returning the product, with getting their questions answered about the product, with whatever their journey tends to be associated with the product. And how can we use digital or whatever domain you're responsible for, advertising or whatever it is that you feel you are being asked to focus on to alleviate pain. And so maybe you conclude that, I don't know, one of the problems that women have is figuring out what size blade. They buy a razor, they need the new blade. I know I've had this problem, where I'm like, wait a minute, which blade goes with this? Is it the 4 blade or the 5 blade? And I'm in the store and I need new blades. And I'm like, but will this blade fit my razor? So there's a point of pain, a point of confusion, uncertainty. And you think, well, is there something I can do digitally to make that an easy problem to solve? Take a picture of any razor and it'll show me immediately exactly which blades are compatible or whatever. But the point is, start by understanding what is less than optimal about the current experience of the full customer journey of that product, and then ideate ways to improve it through digital, and then test those with users. Depending on what the idea is, the way you test it may differ, but maybe you create a prototype, you get some representative users, you can let them play with it, use it, get a sense of, does it really solve the problem? It's easy enough to use, et cetera. And now you're on your way to helping in some small way, doing something with digital to alleviate, one point of pain. And that's the same thing you're trying to do with a huge transformation. The only difference is you're just trying to alleviate more points of pain. You're trying to alleviate it for more people across more product lines. And when you have a successful project like that, first of all, you're much more likely to have a successful project if you follow that kind of customer-driven design thinking type approach, as I describe in the book, because that's your aim. If you just come up with a bunch of ideas with your client in a conference room and execute on them, I mean, it might work, but that's sort of like just putting a blindfold on and shooting a gun. You might hit your target. It's not impossible, but it's not super likely. If you do the right kind of research, now you've aimed, and are you definitely sure to hit your target? No, you could still miss target, but you're much more likely. And so, but once you do hit the target, then you have more credibility. Then people say, wow, look what the female razor division did. Look at how they did this one little digital tool and how it's impacted the sale of women's razors in that one division. And now you have maybe a little more credibility to say, we applied a process based on this guy, Howard Tiersky's book, or whatever. And we like to apply it more broadly, right? This is not specific or unique to women's razors. And now you have the opportunity to maybe move up with the organization, not because it's going to be more money for you or all that, although obviously businesses always want to grow, but because you can have a bigger impact. My hope is that agencies who read this book walk away thinking, I can have a bigger impact on my clients. I can have a bigger impact on my clients' customers by using the right process and by in persuading the organization to be more ambitious in terms of the kind of digital transformation that they're really undertaking. And in the end, you could save their company, because the companies that aren't moving fast enough, as we said earlier, are at the risk of irrelevance. So if you're the one who comes in there and persuades them to do a bigger transformation, you may not just be making a sale, you may be saving them.
And that could almost be the closing line of this podcast. But I do have a single question I left to ask you, and I ask all my guests the same question. It is, what does innovation mean to you?
Innovation means doing something new that works, or maybe a process to do things that are new in search of something that works. Because sometimes when you're innovating, it doesn't work. And that doesn't mean you're not innovating, but the goal is something that improves something, whether that's the customer experience, the cost of manufacturing a widget, the amount of gas that's used to get from, Detroit to Des Moines, or, or whatever it is. You come up with something new and you're trying to figure out how to make something better. I also think, though, that people should be careful about getting caught up too much on what words mean. I've sometimes found myself in meetings where people are arguing about, what does innovation mean? What does branding mean? What does digital transformation mean? And in the end, it kind of doesn't matter all that much. We need to figure out what we need to do to be successful. We need to figure out, what do we want? We want more revenue. We want more customer loyalty. Okay, what do we need to do to get it? And if you want to call those activities innovation, you want to call them transformation, you want to call them something else, it's helpful if within an organization, we all agree on a word. Just for communication purposes, we have a common label for something. But beyond that, words are just utilities to help label more abstract concepts like innovation. So that's my definition of innovation, but I wouldn't consider it authoritative. And as I say, I think the important thing is not what a word means, but that you're doing the things to figure out, how do you need to change? What do you need to do that's new and different to make your customers' experience better, to make your business more successful?
And that's the line we'll close on here. Howard Tiersky, CEO of From, the digital transformation agency, as well as Wall Street Journal Bestseller author. I'm holding up his book here. Of course, this is a podcast, so you can't see it. Winning Digital Customers, the Antidote to Irrelevance. Thank you for being on New Normal today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.